And so after like 4 years, I was like, you know what? Like, I really enjoy this side of like, dealing with the supply chain on the, in the spirits industry. And I just saw like this huge opportunity that like people like just didn't really understand like how it worked. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start a freight brokerage focused on the wine and spirits industry.
This episode is brought to you by Isometric Technologies, ISO, the ultimate freight broker's secret weapon. With ISO, you'll have access to industry-wide service performance benchmarks, dynamic carrier and customer scorecards, and powerful analytics so you can understand your service strengths, address your weaknesses, and differentiate your carrier network from the competition. To learn more and get started, visit iso.io today. Alex, while we record this episode, I want us to feel like as if we're eating dinner at a nice steakhouse in Memphis, just having a nice chit chat. I know that, we've talked a few times before over Zoom and stuff like that. And kind of wanted just to hear, like, if you could give us like a little bit of an introduction of who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Yeah. So Alexander Folk, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I've started 3 companies in Memphis. 2 were in the wine and spirits industry. The first one was a vodka distillery that I started and ended up selling it. And then I stayed on with the new group of owners to start a bourbon distillery, which is called Blue Note Bourbon. And when we started, we kind of stumbled into this third-party barrel storage business, which like I really enjoyed. So we were storing barrels for all these bourbon brokers, which is this like huge behind the scenes business in that industry where people were just like buying and selling bourbon barrels on the market. And a lot of these bourbon brokers didn't have the federal permit to possess the alcohol, which we did in Memphis. And so we kind of just like stumbled into that business. I really enjoyed it, managing the inventory, dealing with the trucks coming in and out, and kind of I was spending a lot of my time like teaching the freight brokers our customers were using, like all the rules and regulations in the industry, because it's such a highly regulated industry. And so after like 4 years, I was like, you know what, like I really enjoy this side of like, dealing with the supply chain on the, in the spirits industry. And I just saw like this huge opportunity that like people like just didn't really understand like how it worked. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to start a freight brokerage focused on the wine and spirits industry. And so I called Nick Bogdanovich, who worked for another freight brokerage in Memphis, and he did a lot of work for us. And I was like, hey man, I'm thinking about starting this freight brokerage in Memphis. Like at the time I was thinking I would do like the agency model, like, work for a larger agency. So I told him about that, and he's like, no. Like, let's just start our own freight brokerage. It's easy. Like, it's really not that hard. I was like, all right, sounds good. Turned out to be a lot harder than made it sound, but I was like, you know what, let's do it. I had at the time I had a 1-year-old little boy, and this being my 3rd company to start, I was like, you know what, like if I'm going to do it, I have to do it now. Like my son, he's, largely drinking milk and not eating a lot of food. So he's not very expensive right now. So I can like take another risk. And my poor wife has been very supportive. Like I started dating my wife when I was raising money for my first company. And, and so she's been through like all the ups and downs, which, bless her heart, because she's been very supportive. But, that was like my reasoning. He's not that old. And so I decided to do it, and we started it with our own money. And this was like, also to point out, this is also like right as the pandemic was like becoming a thing. And we didn't like, we were just like, well, we feel like very strongly about this, and we'll just see what happens. And we ended up growing extremely fast after about a year, like purely just freight brokerage. After about a year, a lot of our customers were, complaining about not having warehouse space, and us being in Memphis with, warehouse space is pretty cheap here. It's pretty available. We just decided to get into the warehousing business as well, to, just to be able to service our customers on more of the 3PL side. And initially we thought we were going to do a lot more just like bulk, like pallet storage for our spirits customers, to storing empty glass bottles. And so that was like the original idea. And it kind of like immediately changed to us doing like 90% of the warehouse being just a transload facility, because there's so much drayage moving in and out of Memphis. And it ended up being a great decision. We just continued to grow. And then about 2 years ago, the Armstrong company, which is a Memphis-based household goods moving company, they've been around for 60 years, but primarily have always been in household goods moving. And when the housing crisis of 2008 hit, like that whole business kind of like really slowed down. So they got into what they call commercial moving, which is essentially the same thing, but like moving schools and warehouses, that type of stuff. And but like that business is just not as big as it used to be. And so they were looking to get into the traditional third-party logistics industry. And so they created this whole new company called Armstrong Supply Chain Solutions, which a mentor of mine was asked to come run. And he reached out to us. He's like, hey, I'm starting this company for Armstrong. Would you all be interested in selling your transportation company to us, and you all stay on? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Because we'd gotten to the point where we were growing so fast. And like, as you know, in the freight brokerage industry, it's like you have to have a ton of cash to be able to pay your carriers on time and wait for your customers to pay you in 45 days. And so you're like, really like even successful brokerages, like you're a couple of customer closes away from like going out of business if you don't have the cash to, support that. And so it kind of came at like a perfect time, because we were thinking like either we're going to have to raise money or like figure out something else. And Armstrong came, and we were like, yeah, this sounds great. You'll have 4.5 million square feet of warehouse space, 400 trucks. It was a perfect opportunity for us at that time. And so we sold it, the majority of the company, to them 2 years ago. And I agreed to staying on for 2 years. And that was up in January.
Yeah.
Was that too long?
No, that was a good story. No, I really enjoyed that. So you, on your LinkedIn profile, it says that you started at Armstrong, or it was formerly known as BBF Global Logistics, in July 2020, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you sold it in March of 2022. Is that correct?
Correct.
So within less than 2 years, so it was a year and 9 months, you built and sold a freight brokerage.
Yeah.
Okay. That's something that's a rarity, I would say. Like typically you need at least like 3 years of like, finance statements to like even have a potential buyer. So how was that? And then, there's actually a few things that I want to talk about, because you said you sold a wine, not wine. Was it wine business beforehand?
So the first company was a vodka distillery.
Vodka distillery. And you sold that. Yep.
And then we started a bourbon brand.
Okay. So you've been like an entrepreneur for a while now, and 2 successful sales.
Yeah, and I still have my QA at the bourbon company. So
Okay.
yeah,
Nice.
fingers
Cool.
crossed.
That's fascinating. Okay, so like being able to sell within 2 years, I'm kind of interested in kind of like understanding that. I know I don't want to, I guess, you to disclose everything, but
Yeah.
I mean, how was the feeling, first of all? Like, how did it feel to sell a brokerage?
Hey there, amazing listeners. If you're enjoying what you're hearing on our podcast, we need your support. It will only take a moment, but it would mean the world to us. Please make sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to share with one of your friends that would enjoy our content. Your engagement helps us reach more people and bring more awesome episodes to you. Thanks a million, and thanks for being part of the podcast community.
I'd say it felt really good. And it was just kind of one of those situations where, we were very motivated to find a solution. And then Armstrong was also motivated to get a transportation division within their company. And it was like one of those things where it just like it happened at the perfect time. Like we had the conversations, like when we needed to have the conversations. And for us, like we were growing so fast that it was a great opportunity because we immediately, like I had mentioned earlier, we had gotten into warehousing. So in Memphis, we were doing a lot of drayage, transloading, and just domestic truckload freight. And when we were considering the Armstrong offer, it was like, well, if we sell to them, then we automatically have 32 warehouses all over the country, 4.5 million square feet of warehouse space like at our disposal, and also 400 trucks. And the whole thing with the trucks was that historically those trucks were used for household goods moving, where the driver actually helps unload the trailer. And so many of these drivers had been with Armstrong forever, and they were getting older and just they could still drive a truck, but they couldn't help unloading the trailers. And so they were looking for other ways to use their trucks in the 3PL industry. So it was like, well, it was just a perfect kind of opportunity. But I will mention, previous to selling to Armstrong, I had started 2 companies, well, really 3, but had always been in the startup world my whole life. And Armstrong's a much larger company, and so that was a little shock to my system of being put into a corporate environment, which I just was not used to.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say anything bad. I mean, it's a great company, but for me, I'm just more interested and driven by the startup.
Sure. I'm kind of curious, Alex, as you did actually mention this beforehand, that Memphis is a big drayage hub. Yeah. And can you talk about that a little bit? Because I don't know, I don't know much about the Memphis scene, and I don't know much about drayage either. Why is there so much drayage in Memphis?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because Memphis, and this is something that I guess 3 years ago, I was just to myself, I was it blows my mind that there's not more logistics startups in Memphis, because Memphis is one of the most important cities to the global supply chain. And you mentioned drayage, but Memphis has what they call the 4 R's. So you have river, rail, runway, and road. And Memphis is one of the few cities that all 5 major rails service the city. It's one of the busiest cargo airports in the world, one of the busiest inland waterway ports in the country. And I think you can fact check me on this, but I think from Memphis you can reach 90% of the country within 2 days by truck.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you take all that into consideration, I mean, warehousing's cheap here. And so if you have your distribution facility in Memphis, you can reach 90% of the population within 2 days. And in regards to drayage, the Memphis exports 40 to 50% of U.S. cotton every year, like goes through Memphis, just due to like all the farmland around here.
Sure.
You also have International Paper, AutoZone here. So I mean, it's just a huge drayage hub.
And that's why also FedEx has its hub at the Memphis International Airport, is because of like being able to reach so many people so quickly.
Yeah, and I think if you take into consideration FedEx, like from Memphis, you can reach, I think it's like 90% of the world's population in like 3 days.
Wow. I know that like there's like, so FedEx has Memphis as their hub, and then UPS has Louisville.
Yeah.
And both of those are strategically done due to geographic reasons. It's like both Memphis and Louisville are just like in near reach of a major part of the U.S. population.
Yeah.
So like Memphis overall, I mean, it does have some sort of like a freight hub. Like I'm talking about like more for like from the companies wise. Like there are some companies that like do a lot of business, but you're kind of surprised, Alex. You said that it's not that big of a player, like maybe Chicago or Chattanooga, right?
Right. Yeah, it's not as big of a player in terms of like, you know, logistics startups that you see in Chicago and Chattanooga, which is like surprising because like the customer concentration here is so dense that, and I tell people this all the time, like I promise you, like come to Memphis, spend a couple of days here, like I'll show you around and introduce you to people, because there's so many people here, like buyers in Memphis, whether you know you're solving issues in the trucking industry, warehousing industry, exporting, importing. I mean, it's like all your customers, not all your customers are here, but like it's a very dense customer base.
That's good to know. So if anyone's listening, they want to get some shippers.
Come to Memphis.
Hit up Alex. Alex. That's cool. So are you originally from Memphis?
Yeah. So born and raised in Memphis, and then I went to Alabama for college.
Okay.
And
Nice.
Came right back.
Okay. And during the whole, I guess, transition from working in the distillery to running a brokerage, you mentioned a lot of like the regulations when it comes to transporting like barrels of whiskey. I'm kind of curious, like, is there a difference in regulation from like transporting beer to like transporting barrels? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So like you have like the liquor industry in one section, and then wine and beer in the other one. So that what makes the liquor unique is it's governed by the federal government, and not as much on the state level. I mean, the states have like specific rules around like high proof alcohol, but largely it's governed by the federal government, and a lot of that's due to like the taxing issues and you know previous issues with I mean, like back in like the Prohibition era, like most of the liquor laws that exist today are from that industry, from that world where they were fixing like the corruption in the industry, and but like every state has its own specific rules, but like the other thing that makes it really unique is the way that alcohol is shipped. And like understanding that, and it's pretty crazy. So like a 53 wooden barrel full of bourbon whiskey is not considered hazardous or flammable.
Okay.
Which you would think it's highly flammable.
Yeah.
But a 55-gallon steel barrel, like that's completely sealed, is considered flammable.
Okay.
And that's because of lobbying from like back in the 30s and 40s that like exempted wooden barrels from all the fire code and like hazardous codes, which is like pretty mind blowing. But that's like something like that's really important to understand, like when you're shipping it, because like when you're picking your carriers, you're going to pay a lot more to have a carrier that can carry hazmat goods when you don't actually need that carrier to be able to carry hazmat.
That's interesting. So you know all the regulations.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, like I said, I mean, that was like one of the motivating factors to start the freight brokerage is that I was having to tell like even a lot of like customers that like were newer to the industry, like I was having to teach them like even like the rules, like the warehousing rules in like their state that I was having to like teach them. And so I was like, I enjoy talking about bourbon. I know all the rules and I like the transportation side. So it was just a perfect fit.
So when you opened BBF Global Logistics, were most of your customers like alcohol shippers?
Yep. Yeah. So our
Okay.
first like 4 or 5 customers were either like liquor brands or liquor distributors.
Okay. And that's how you built up. And then did you, I guess, go out and go to different industries, try to get different customers, or were you just kind of like focused on the alcohol distribution?
Well, so like this is what like we would always tell like our new brokers, it's like when you're out there selling, like try to find something that like you enjoy like talking about all day long that obviously has transportation needs, but like, you know, figure out like what you really enjoy, like whether it's talking about like toys or video games or like whatever it is, and like really really prospect that industry. And so like for me, it was always had, I mean, still is, you know, I love talking about that industry, so that's what I focused on exclusively. But but we would, as we hired people, you know, we diversified to different industries, like the typical ones like steel, cotton. We did a lot of cotton, a lot of auto parts. But and circling back to drayage too, like we had no intention to really get into drayage when we first started. But after about a year, like drayage, just like general commodity drayage, was about 40% of our business.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. So let's just say, can you name the largest industries in Memphis in that region? You said alcohol, cotton, steel.
Steel, a lot of steel,
Okay.
auto parts.
Auto parts, yeah. Like what kind of large manufacturers are out near Memphis?
A lot of paper.
Paper. Okay. Well, like name wise.
They also just opened I think it's, I can't remember the name. It might be Cummins. Just opened a big battery plant like right around Memphis.
Okay.
Like battery manufacturing plant. You can fact check that too. I want to say it is Cummins.
Which car manufacturers are out in Memphis? Are there any?
We got Louisville City just opening like an hour north of Memphis.
What is?
It's Ford's new production plant for their EV trucks, the Lightning. Or Lightning. And so they're building that right now. And I think it's opening in like a year. And then so like that itself is just going to bring a lot more manufacturing, like just around that to service that production plant.
So like I know during COVID, like it seemed like everyone in the north was like, you know, migrating south and moving south. Did Memphis get some of that too? Because like when I went to Phoenix, there's a lot of, you know, like warehouses getting built. Same in Charlotte. Is Memphis the same way?
Yeah. Memphis is a huge warehousing city.
Okay.
I mean, it's everywhere. There's huge, you know, warehousing facilities, and then you also, like, if you look at Memphis on a map, it's like Memphis is like really they call it like the capital of the Mid-South, and it's really like a tri-state area. So like Memphis is on the far left hand corner of Tennessee, but it borders Arkansas and Mississippi. And so there's a lot of and especially in like in North Mississippi, there's a ton of manufacturing and warehousing there as well. And a lot of that's like the newer warehouses that have like been built in the past like 10 years. But then like in Arkansas, like you have all the farmland, and even Mississippi as well. But I mean, all that just services, all that's just like kind of like run out of Memphis.
Okay.
And so like when you talk about cotton too, like all the public and major cotton companies, all their headquarters are in Memphis.
Okay. Got it. So when you are like, when you had BBF Armstrong Transportation, like was the concentration of your customers predominantly in that Memphis area right there?
Like initially, no, it wasn't. Because I mean, a lot of the first customers were like spirits companies that like I had known before. So a lot in like Chicago, Florida, Texas. And then like as we started bringing on more salespeople, we were like, hey, y'all need to focus on being able to focus on the prospects that you can like go see in person. Because I mean, we would have everyone spend at least one day a week out, like physically out in the market prospecting. And then so we did like ended up, like most of our drayage customers were all Memphis companies. So we did eventually have a lot of Memphis customers.
Got it. And in terms of nowadays, because like you said in January 2024, which is 2 months ago, you stepped away because you had to stay on. Were you kind of just like done with like the brokerage world and you wanted to kind of like move on to another project, or what was the mindset like there?
Well, like I loved the brokerage industry, and that wasn't it at all. Like I just love it. But after after a year of being with Armstrong, like how I mentioned, like it just blew my mind that there's no supply chain startups in Memphis. Like a year ago, I just got more involved in like the Memphis startup scene, and there's a lot of groups here that are very, very interested in growing the supply chain startup scene in Memphis. And so I just like started getting involved with those groups, and just because I love working with startups. And like one of the big things I noticed early on is, and a lot of these companies I was talking to, like originally, they didn't have a supply chain background, and that was like very obvious when you started talking to them, because they had this like great tech engineering background, but they were trying to solve issues in the supply chain that, if you had supply chain experience, like you would know that those weren't really like big issues, that like, solving this last mile problem, like isn't other people have already done that. Like take that technology and solve issues in the drayage industry, because no one understands that industry like from that perspective. And so that's just like what really motivated me to once my 2 years was up with Armstrong, to get back out in the startup scene and like really help these startups with their direction, their growth strategy, and really, and also promoting Memphis at the same time around that.
Sure. Okay. So what do you do nowadays? Like, because there's like Apollo Advisory Group and then the Alchemist Accelerator. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the Alchemist Accelerator, they're a B2B tech accelerator that is headquartered in San Francisco. And I guess like a year and a half ago, they opened a Memphis hub, like their first hub outside of San Francisco, because they independently identified Memphis as and this is their quote, a hub for supply chain disruption. And so when they moved here, like I got connected with them, and that's when I like really started mentoring startups last year. And then when I was deciding like what to do post Armstrong exit, I started just an advisory group called Apollo that's like really focused on early stage and growth stage startups in the supply chain and food and beverage industry. And then I'm also working with a boutique growth strategy and transformation consulting group in Memphis called Epic Pivot. and they do some like really amazing stuff. Just, I mean, like around growth strategy, and also like helping companies kind of what they call is like lead with purpose, and like having like a true purpose for your company to be successful. So that's what I'm doing now.
Okay. Got it. Interesting.
That's a lot.
Yeah, no, that's cool. It's nice to talk to an entrepreneur that, you know, it's what I like. What I like to learn more about is like definitely like building a business that is sellable, right? I mean, like, and I don't know if you have like any like tips on that, or something that you could like be like, you know, this is something that helped me. Like, I kind of want to get into your brain more and see, like, because I don't know, you sold a brokerage in 2 years. That's kind of like remarkable.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think, I mean, a lot of it has to do with the first company I started. Like I said, I mean, I started it when I was 23, raised money, and I was young, and, you know, made a lot of mistakes. And, you know, that selling that, when I exited that company, it was not a successful exit at all.
Okay.
It's pretty brutal, honestly. You know, we sold it for pennies on the dollar.
Got
and
it.
I had to call like 20 investors in one day and tell them, hey, sorry, like we're going out of business. And so that was like really, you know, that was like really hard on me. And like, I honestly didn't know if, like at the time, didn't know if like I wanted to continue down the startup world. But like, I don't know, like I just like we made a lot of mistakes, and like I just like when I was like reflecting on it, like I knew like I understood what we did wrong, and like saw like a successful path, you know, a small one, but like I was just like, I don't know if, you know, maybe I should just go get a corporate job. And, you know, I like wanted to get married. I've been dating my now wife for a couple of years, and I was like, I don't know, there's something about security. But like I just had this like small little flame still flickering in me, that I was just like, all right, well, I'll just try it one more time and see what happens. And I'm glad I did, because you know, that's like what got me to BBF, like starting that. But, you know, I learned a lot just with those first two companies I started. And I mean, it's pretty brutal starting a company, and, you know, going through all the ups and downs on a daily basis. But I would say like I'm like with BBF, you know, I'd kind of like really studied the lean startup theory. Are you familiar with that?
Is that from the book, The Lean Startup, or no?
Yeah. So it's a book, and
Okay.
like the theory
Yeah.
with the lean startup is like you create like what they call the MVP, which is like your minimally viable product.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, find some early adopters, that like ideally people that you kind of know already, that'll take it easy on you and be like, hey, you know, this is what I'm doing. Like, can you like provide feedback? And then once you get the feedback is like when you really like put it in growth mode and like advance the, you know, whatever you're doing. And so like, I don't know, I'm just a big fan of just like keeping everything very simple, like find
And lean.
like find something that like you can either improve upon, or find a gap in the market that you can fill, and just do it. Like don't overanalyze it. You know, you've heard like the term paralysis by analysis. I mean, that's like a true thing. Like you can sit around for years thinking about starting a company, reading all the books, like listening to people talk about it, but like at the end of the day, you just have to like go do it and like rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
And like get like true feedback.
Totally. It's funny you brought up the book, because I opened it up. It's kind of, there's a funny story behind the book. It's called The Lean Startup, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And like one day, like I just like, I checked the mail, like it's in the mail, like the book's in there. And I'm like, I thought maybe my co-founder bought it for me or something like that. I messaged him like, would you buy this book for me? And he's like, no, And I'm like thinking to myself, because I'm in Poland right now, and like sometimes like I buy like a lot of books, and sometimes like it takes like 6 to 8 weeks to get, just because like they ship it, I think, from America. And like I completely had forgotten that I bought it, and so I'm like, oh, okay, whatever, like I'll have it. But I opened it up a few weeks ago. I didn't actually like fully get into it yet. But so you're recommending that book, Alex, the Lean Startup?
Yeah, that's a good one, and I love like all those books, like Traction. That's another good one.
Traction's a great one. I read that in the beginning of the year. I'm currently reading Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blount.
Really?
I'm not sure if you heard of that one.
I haven't read that one.
Okay.
But I think Traction's a great one, and like I actually read that one like a year ago, and I wish I'd read it a lot earlier.
I read it like 2 months ago, and I wish I had read it 3 years ago. So,
yeah, that one's a good one, and like I've always, like, in that book they talk about it's the like you really need like two types of people to make like a startup successful, like the visionary and the integrator. And I've always just, like, not by like training or anything, but I've always just gravitated towards the integrator role. And I think that's, like, to your question too, like, to like make companies successful. I mean, I think that's another huge point. It's like being honest with yourself on like what you're truly good at and what you're passionate about. And like, if that's sales or operations, like, own it, and then find someone that's way better than you at the thing that you're not good at, and join forces and work together. I mean, I think that's a huge tip.
So
you got it.
I'm curious, like, right now, are you like heavily, well, you are heavily invested time wise on Memphis? Like, you're like, your vision is to kind of put like Memphis on the map when it comes to like the startup scene, especially for logistics.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that your main focus? Like, is that like your kind of dream or goal right now, the next few years?
That's definitely, I mean, that's my main focus. And like, that's my dream, is for Memphis to be a very, like I've told this to other people, like, I have two kids now, a boy and a girl. And like, my goal is to do my part to make Memphis like a viable place for them to want to come back to after college, like if they choose to. And I truly believe that like creating a robust startup ecosystem is like the big key to that. Because like, if you think about it, if you have like all these startups in Memphis, like largely a lot of like tech talent, that it's going to attract like bigger companies to open, offices in Memphis as well. So it's just like this whole like building this ecosystem is just fascinating to me, and just like kind of helping companies just navigate that and like discover Memphis is, really, it's really my passion right now.
Okay. That's cool. I've only driven through Memphis. I never actually stayed there before.
You need to stay. It's an awesome city. It's, the food's really good. There's a lot of entertainment. Cost of living is very cheap.
Okay.
It checks off a lot of boxes. And like I said, there's a lot of organizations in Memphis very motivated by, building out the startup scene here.
Sure. Got it. Interesting. That's good to know. If I'm ever driving by Memphis, I'll let you know, Alex.
Yeah.
I'll stop by for a steak dinner.
Yeah.
That's cool. Like, if someone like is listening and like would want to learn more about potentially like Memphis, or might want to just connect, like, how should they reach out to you?
I would say just like find me on LinkedIn and send me a message, and we'll get connected. Okay.
Alexander Folk, LinkedIn. I don't think there's any other Alexander Folk, if I'm not mistaken.
No, there's an old, I don't even think they're alive anymore, but an old actor.
I actually just brought that. I was Googling your name like an hour ago, and I saw the actor. There was like the IMDb profile. That's cool. Nice. I guess just to wrap it up real quick. Tell me about like the whole Serbia outsourcing thing.
Dude, I love Serbia. So we I don't know if Nick told you this, but like it was like 4 months after we started the brokerage. We had a sales role posted on like GoDaddy or something, and this guy from the Ukraine applied. And we're like, huh, we'll just like talk to him and see what he's got to say. And he was just like a very nice guy, like very like sounded very motivated, and he gave us some like referrals or whatever. And so we called them, and they were like, dude, hire this guy. Like, he's amazing. He like works very hard. So we're like, well, we'll see what happens. So we hired him, and he crushed it. And we ended up hiring 5 more people in Ukraine, and this is all before the war. And they were doing a really good job. And then the war happened, and we kept them on for a few more months until like the internet connection was just wasn't working anymore. And then so Nick, he's from Serbia, and he's like, well, I got my cousin over there, and I bet we could get a couple of guys over there to dispatch for us, and we did, and we grew that. I mean, there's like six people over there now, and they're just like they're extremely educated, very hardworking, and just like very motivated people. And I'm very bullish on that area for like the future of the supply chain.
I think I met most of them. Yeah. I mean, I liked it a lot too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like, what do you think about the outsourcing, just like in general?
Definitely. Yeah. I see a lot of potential. There's a lot of people there that are, smart, hardworking, great English and stuff like that. Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Freight Caviar Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, or if you didn't, leave a review. Let me know what you think. I appreciate any feedback. If you'd like to have more Freight Caviar content, go to freightcaviar.com and subscribe to my email newsletter.